Welcome to another episode of the Journeys of Not So Ordinary People podcast. I am one of your co hosts. I'm Dr. Joe Hamlett. And as always, alongside me is Dr. Dave Peltz. How you doing today, Dave? Dr.
I'm doing
Dave?
I'm doing great, Joe, Dr. Joe.
Yeah, those double D's. All right.
Anyways.
So we're off to a good start so far. Thanks everybody just been tuned in to previous episodes. Thanks for coming back. And for those of you who are just tuning in, hopefully you're not deterred or want to turn away immediately because that's not normally how we do things, but it's a good start as well. But this is our mid-career podcast. We want to help you, focus on what's going to get you to that next level. Just, been stagnant for a while, or you just want to try something new or do something different. Hopefully we can help with those decisions or help you with tools that might help you with those decisions. I know I said a lot. Normally don't start off this way, but again, excited about being here today. And so with that, as you all know, one of us will introduce the topic and the other one will get us started. So I have that honor today. And so today's topic is the power of short term goals. And we talk a lot about goals, but we don't necessarily talk about short term goals. So Dave's going to get us started with the power of short term goals.
Yeah. So we were looking back earlier in season five. That's the season we're in right now. And within the first few episodes, we talked about designing your next 10 years. So we're kind of shrinking that down. We typically look at things from a broader perspective, bigger perspective, but today we're going to narrow it down and focus on the power of short-term goals. And there is a definite power to that. It can help you build momentum. It can help you with the progression of tasks or projects. It can increase your confidence. It can
Yep.
make you stronger mentally and physically, depending on what type of goals and what type of environments you're working in, whether it's personal or professional. And so when I think about the power of short-term goals, I'll be honest. When I was growing up, I didn't really have any goals in high school. I thought, goal is to get a good grade, but I didn't know how to get good grades necessarily. Joe and I have told our stories about that, but we won't revisit that for right now. It's another story for another time. But so I just wanted to, like most teenagers, get out on my own. And the way I did that was going into the military. And um, it was a big wake up because they have goals. They have goals for you. They make you have goals, and they give you goals whether you want them or not.
Right.
And so that's really where that self discipline started to come in about um, establishing short term goals, because sometimes our short term goals were just to live day to day in basic training and some of the exercises we were in, and well, today you're going to run 5 miles. uh, okay, but to
Right.
get to that, I have to be able to run a mile,
Yeah.
right? So, you have to build up to some of these short term goals or these longer term goals. And some of these short term goals or some of these longer term goals can then become short term goals because you've progressed in your goal setting. So, the power of short term goals really started happening for me. And we talk about this a lot, Joe and I, about when I started college. That's really
Yeah.
when I I made a conscious decision to make a change that was going to be uncomfortable. And the first goal was to look into school. It was
Yeah.
intimidating to me because I did not do well in high school. Um, and so the first goal was to meet with an enrollment advisor. And I did that. And then the next goal was to actually start school. And the next goal after that was to get through just the first class. And that was a short term goal. And then the first class was kind of an introduction to college. The second class was when the real learning started happening. We were actually taking your lower division classes, English, writing, mathematics, all that history, sociology, psychology, elective courses. And that's where I really had to understand the power of short-term goals, because I was working full time and I had to understand how to balance work with education with family. So there were short-term goals in each one of those. And some of it was just to get through that day so I could prepare for the assignment the next day or prepare for school for next day, or how many pages do I have to write today so I can have my assignment ready for tomorrow or in 3 days, because the next 2 days I'm not going to have any time to do this assignment. So whether it's working on a project, or whether it's school, or whether it's lifting weights or being in the gym, you know short-term goals are imperative.
You know what, Dave? You touched on so many things that I would have said in the intro as well. Just because you're right. As a kid, goal for me was just to graduate high school, and like you said, I didn't do that too well. I had to take class over because I failed. So not really understanding at that time the power of goal setting. It was just to survive because, like you said, I didn't have any goals. I had lost my dream. So I was just coasting, just cruising. And so I was really just faced with whatever was put in front of me. And you said it too. If you don't select your goals, then somebody's gonna select them for you,
Mhm.
which turned out, like you say, in boot camp, that did help me because it was aligned to what they wanted, but it did teach me about goal setting. But it wasn't like you said until that intentional goal of going back to school. That's when it really started for me as far as understanding the power of that. Because, like you, it started, hey, deciding to go back to school, deciding to sit down with that counselor and them talk about, what a degree looked like, what college life was like. And then, like you said, that first class was that introductory. So it helped you to start to establish some goals, to understand what it's going to take to finish a class, finish a degree. And again, like what you said, family, full-time job, all those things, figuring out how to go from one class to a graduate, to graduating, to earning a degree. And it was, like you said, the first class was that introductory, but then once we got into the meat of the courses and start
Mhm.
taking classes, that's when I started to feel overwhelmed because
Mhm.
I started to think that long term goal. When I sat down with my advisor and they said, "Hey, it's going to take you 4 years to get your bachelor's degree," I immediately felt, that this was going to take too long. How am I going to figure all this out and get all this accomplished with, again, working full time, 3 active kids, married, all these things in the military, deploying, all those things were coming into my head. And I'm thinking, I'm not going to make it 4 years. And just like what you said, I started to focus not on that entire program in front of me, but that one class I was in. And then I even broke it down further, um, down into, like you said, 1 week, one assignment. And then that turned into what you said at the very beginning of all this was that momentum, that confidence, and that sense of achievement because I turned it into many goals. Not just the one completing one class, completing 1 week, completing one assignment. And every time I gained confidence, I gained momentum. And before I knew it, I was a doctor. But that's how far this short term goal set me up for success because I was starting to recognize success after success after success, and then that became the norm. That
Right.
became the expectation that you're going to achieve these, and that was so powerful for me to go from, again, a 40-year-old student to recognizing, if I create these short-term goals, that I will succeed, and that's exactly what happened to me. So just exactly what you said, that power that you gain from being successful, no matter how large, how small, that success is contagious. You want more of it. You want to feel it over and over again, that confidence, that momentum. And that's what started happening to me. And that's why now, even today, I look at, when we did started our podcast, it was about not necessarily even thinking about success, but just taking it one episode at a time. One, every Sunday morning we get together thinking about let's complete this one. And now, like you said at the very beginning, we're into season 5. 200. This is our 222nd episode.
Wow.
And it started with, again, just having some sense of success by getting on the mic, turning on our recording equipment, and starting. And again, now we're in 220, episode 222. So again, that momentum, that discipline you start to gain and create, just that persistence, all those things comes with that power of creating those short-term goals.
Yeah, and I'm gonna kind of jump into this from a slightly different angle. There's and I want to mention before I do that, this can help you whether you're exercising or working out or walking, increasing that distance, that strength, that mobility, that ability. So it's not just going to school. It could be project management at work. It could be doing something to achieve something at work. The angle I'm going to address this from, because this is what hit me hard early in my career and early into my education, and actually at several of my employers, because when you move into a new position, a higher position within another company, there's an adjustment period. And that is, okay, I set these short-term goals. What if I fail? I don't want to fail, so I'm not going to set a goal that's going to challenge me too much. I'm just going to do what I know I can do. So it's not really a goal, it's just a norm for me. And I would assert some caution with that perspective, because by doing that, I learned all it did was hold me back and make things take much longer. You know, in the military, we're fit, but I wanted to be stronger and bigger because I wasn't a big guy in the military. So I paired up with a couple of guys I knew that were into weightlifting, and I learned I have to start out light with to do simple things and then increase the weight little by little. Well, that's the same thing with establishing a goal. I didn't go in there to bench press 250 pounds the first day. I could barely bench half my weight. And that was when I was fit in the military. So you're not failing. If you set a goal and you fail, you don't fail because you learn. And there's a misconception that, failing, I've failed so many times at jobs and works. No, you haven't failed. You fail when you don't try, when you don't set goals. That's when you fail. And to your point, Joe, just coasting for so long. And I started to realize, really, I mean, just in my face, the power of short term goals, because when I was doing college enrollment, I would have people that would tell me, I can't start school now, or I can't start the certification now, or I can't start fitness now, maybe in 6 months or a year. Well, in 6 months or a year, that means you've just lost or given up 6 months or a year of goals that you could have accomplished.
Of growth. Yeah.
Of growth. Yeah, absolutely.
Well, we touched on it. I jokingly said something about my bike because it's a nice day out today. And, years back during the pandemic, I did start riding my bike, and it started kind of like what you just said. I started after not riding a bike for 20 years. The first time I got back on the bike, I rode probably a mile, and I got
Oh,
off the
come on
bike.
now. I would have loved to have been there. Watch you get about 20 feet and then fall down.
No,
That's what
because
happened.
no, I actually did ride right about a mile, and but after I got off, I was like, oh my goodness, this I'm sore, this hurts. I don't know if I'm going to do it again. But you know what I did the next day? I rode further. I rode a little bit further, maybe a mile and a quarter, maybe a mile and a half, but I rode further than the day before. And the next day I got back on it, I rode further than that. And by the time I got really into, riding regularly again, I was riding 30 miles, up to 30 miles. But it just started with those incremental do better than the day before, go further than the day before. And that's what it got to, that I just, again, kept chipping away at, you know, riding further, just a little bit further, pushing myself a little bit further. And that felt so great to be able to ride, pull up at the house again and say, hey, I just did 30 miles. and remembering where I was when I first started, when I did that mile and I got off the bike and legs, knees rickety, think I'm going to fall over, going to pass out, to getting off at 30 miles and thinking, oh, that wasn't a bad ride. And so, again, it just, to your point, that whole losing time, it's not, I can't start today, I can't start tomorrow. But in my short, in that short span, it was probably 6 months by the time I was riding 30 miles, which again is, I would have wasted all that time. I would have lost all of that time if I would have said, oh, today's not the right day. It's not perfect. I even got to the point where I was riding in the rain. I,
Nice.
put on a rain suit and go and still, go through puddles and just everything, because I again, that momentum. I kept saying, well, I'm not going to let rain hold me back. I bought gloves when it got cooler. So you
Mhm.
just start to make those adjustments that help you to continue to grow, to help you to continue to, feel that success, that you reached another milestone, a mini milestone. And like I say, I'm not talking go from 1 to 30 the next day. This was gradual, but each day I was winning because I was going further than I did the day before.
So it looks like it's about time for our weekly challenge.
Yep.
So this week's weekly challenge is, we would like you to establish 1 to 3 short-term goals that you can begin focusing on.
Yep.
That simple, that easy. Just 1 to 3 goals, establish them and start working on them. Because short-term goals lead to long-term successes, long-term goals
Absolutely.
being accomplished. So
Yeah, and we didn't specify a time frame because it could be just an hour of your day where you decide to do something that's going to, contribute to whatever that short term goal you set for yourself. Or
or
it
it
could
could
be as,
be 1 year, could be a short-term goal
and that's
because
what
the
I was going to say.
project
It could be
is 5 years
longer.
long. Yeah.
Yep. But we
So
just want you to identify 1 to 3 short-term goals that will contribute in some way to maybe that long-term goal. Maybe you haven't even identified that yet, but
personal, professional, or career,
yep.
your choice. We just want you to get that gray matter muscle in your head between your ears working. So, and as always, we have the downloadable weekly challenge journal to help you track your progress and your weekly challenges that you're working on and working towards. We've also got, again, a couple of assessments that are out there at no cost to help you maybe identify some of those things that you want to start working on. So,
So, Dave, I know we're getting a little bit closer to time. So, is there any final thoughts that you'd like to leave with our audience on the power of short-term goals?
probably just what I've already said is, there is so much power in establishing and working towards short-term goals because they lead to long-term goal success. And you can do it. Start small. Don't reach for the moon or the stars. Maybe just reach across the street. Start small. You can do this. Joe and I are proof of that. We set aside our fear and our insecurities, and we just started moving.
No, it goes back to, and we've said this many times, maybe your short term goal, if you're struggling with something, maybe it's just rolling out of bed and putting that first foot down on the floor
Absolutely.
in that attempt to move forward. And that's really what these short term goals can be. It's just something where you go further than you were before. I think that's the most important piece. It doesn't have to be this grandiose. So I went from, novice to an expert, within a short period of time, but rather it's those small incremental spurts that help you get to that long term goal, that help you recognize that you went from point A to point B. Because I'll go back to exactly what Dave said kind of at the beginning when we are in basic training. And I remember in Air Force basic training, we started that first week, running, and we only ran like a quarter mile. Then the second week we're running half a mile. Then the third week we're running a mile and a half, or 3/4 of a mile, until you eventually got to a mile and a half running that regularly. And that's really what we're talking about. Just that progress that you can calculate, that you can see. Whether you're using a chart or just your memory, that's how you can determine that you're moving forward. Is that if you move further than you were previous day or previous attempt at that, whatever that goal is. So just keep that in mind. It doesn't have to be this monumental go from A to B. You don't have to go from no degree to a doctorate degree. It's basically one class, 1 week, one assignment. It's as simple as that. So, again, thank you for tuning in to this episode. And again, we stress the power of short term goals. It's amazing what you gain from that. And like I say, it just help fuel me to those long term goals. So just really keep that in mind when you're thinking about how elaborate this has to be. It doesn't. So again, thank you all for tuning in. Like we said, if you're new to this, hopefully you gain something from this and you'll come back or you'll tell your friends. Or if you're again long term audience member, please share, like, um, or if there's something you'd like to hear about or us to discuss, please let us know. We're always looking at our descriptions, so or the comments in the descriptions. But again, I'm getting long winded, so thanks for tuning in, and we want you to continue being your not so ordinary you.